The greatest mystery of ancient Egypt may not be the pyramids. It may be something far more difficult to explain. How did one civilization survive for more than 3,000 years? Pharaohs were murdered, dynasties collapsed, foreign armies invaded, gods changed, capitals moved, and somehow Egypt kept coming back. Until one day, it didn't. To understand why, we have to go back to a time before the pharaohs, when Egypt didn't exist at all. Long before the Great Pyramid rose above the desert, before golden masks were placed over the faces of dead kings, before names like Tutankhamun, Ramses, and Cleopatra entered history, there was a river. And without that river, there would have been no Egypt. Every year, the Nile transformed the landscape. Beyond its banks stretched vast deserts. Along the river, water and fertile soil created a narrow corridor of life through northeastern Africa. The Nile did more than feed people. It connected them. Boats carried grain, stone, soldiers, officials, information, and ideas. Geography had given the Nile Valley an unusual combination: fertile land, natural barriers, and a transportation system running directly through its heart. But there was still no Egypt. Different communities developed along the river, with their own leaders, traditions, alliances, and rivalries. Over generations, some became more powerful than others. Small communities became larger political territories. Eventually, two great regions emerged: Upper Egypt in the south and Lower Egypt in the northern delta. Then, around the end of the 4th millennium BC, the balance changed. The precise process remains debated. Later Egyptian tradition compressed unification into the deeds of great kings. Archaeology suggests a more complicated process of competition and consolidation. But one ruler became permanently associated with the moment Egypt became one. Narmer. The famous Narmer palette shows a king wearing crowns, associated with different parts of Egypt and defeating his enemies. It may not record one literal battle or one single day of unification, but by roughly 3100 BC, something extraordinary had happened. Upper and Lower Egypt had been brought under a single monarchy, and one of the longest-lasting political traditions in human history had begun. The king stood at the center of this new order, but he was not merely a political leader. Egyptian kingship became intertwined with Ma'at: order, balance, justice, harmony. The opposite was chaos. The king performed rituals for the gods, protected Egypt's boundaries, and symbolically stood between order and disorder. Individual kings could fail, dynasties could disappear, the state itself could fracture. But the idea of Egypt, a unified land protected by divine order and ruled by a sacred king, could survive the people who temporarily occupied the throne. That may be our first clue. Over the next 3,000 years, Egypt would repeatedly face moments that should have destroyed it. Again and again, Egyptians would try to restore the same fundamental order. In these early centuries, royal authority became increasingly visible in monuments and elaborate tombs. Death itself became political. A king who maintained order in life could not simply disappear when his body stopped breathing. His journey had to continue. Generation after generation, royal tombs became more ambitious. Then around the 27th century BC, during the reign of Djoser, that ambition produced something the world had never seen. At Saqqara, builders stacked enormous layers of stone toward the sky, the Step Pyramid. Egypt had discovered that architecture could do more than house the dead. It could make power appear eternal. And within only a few generations, Egyptian kings would attempt monuments so enormous that thousands of years later, people would still argue about exactly how they were built. But the deeper mystery is not that Egypt learned to build pyramids. It is why an entire civilization became willing and able to devote extraordinary resources to building eternity for its kings. And what happened when the system powerful enough to create those monuments began to fail? The Step Pyramid of Djoser changed everything. For the first time, a king had been given a monument that felt less like a tomb and more like a declaration carved into stone. The ruler may die. The institution does not. Once Egypt discovered what architecture could do for power, there was no going back. The generations that followed pushed the idea further. King Sneferu's reign is associated with several enormous projects, including the Pyramid at Meidum, the Bent Pyramid at Dashur, and the Red Pyramid. You can almost watch Egyptian engineering learning in real time. The Bent Pyramid rises sharply, then changes angle halfway up. Structural concerns are one likely explanation. Whatever happened, the lesson was absorbed. The Red Pyramid that followed achieved something closer to the form we recognize today. Then came Khufu. Around 2600 BC, on the Giza Plateau, Egypt began constructing a monument on a scale that still feels difficult to comprehend: the Great Pyramid. For nearly 4,000 years, it remained the tallest human-made structure on Earth. Thousands upon thousands of stone blocks were quarried, transported, shaped, and placed with extraordinary precision. But the mystery is often framed the wrong way. People ask, how did they build it? A better question for our story is, why could they build it? The Great Pyramid was the product of Egyptian society at its most organized. A functioning state could feed workers. Administrators could calculate supplies. Quarries could be managed. Boats could transport stone along the Nile. Specialized labor could be coordinated. Fields could support people who were not farming every day. And all of it could be justified by a belief system that placed the king at the center of cosmic order. The stones are impressive. The civilization capable of organizing them is even more impressive. Popular culture once imagined the pyramids being built by vast armies of chained slaves. Archaeological evidence from worker settlements near Giza points instead to organized labor forces that were fed, housed, and divided into teams. That does not make ancient labor easy or voluntary in a modern sense, but it changes the picture. A pharaoh did not need to move a single stone himself. His power came from a system capable of coordinating thousands of other people toward one objective. Khufu's pyramid was followed by those of Khafre and Menkaure. Mortuary temples, causeways, tombs, and monuments transformed Giza into a landscape of royal eternity. For the Egyptians who built it, this was not spectacle. It was part of an enormous religious machine. The dead king was expected to continue existing. His body had to be preserved. Rituals had to be performed. Offerings maintained. Priests supported. Estates had to generate the resources that kept the system alive. Death required administration, and administration had a cost. Here the first great contradiction appears. The monuments that demonstrated the pharaoh's strength also created obligations that survived him. Every royal cult consumed resources. Temples accumulated land. Provincial officials became increasingly important. Some local offices grew powerful enough to pass authority within families. The pharaoh still stood at the symbolic center, but power was spreading outward. Later, royal pyramids became smaller. The age of Giza was not repeated. Then, near the end of the Old Kingdom, several pressures appear to have converged. The exceptionally long reign traditionally attributed to Pepi II may have complicated succession. Regional elites had grown stronger. Resources were distributed through increasingly powerful temples and local institutions. Environmental stress may have added another layer. Evidence suggests episodes of severe drought affected parts of the ancient Near East around this broad period. For Egypt, repeated weak Nile floods could mean poorer harvests, less food, and less stability. And suddenly the claim that the pharaoh guaranteed order met an uncomfortable reality. What happens when order disappears anyway? By around 2200 BC, the Old Kingdom was breaking apart. Central authority weakened. Regional rulers became increasingly independent. The political unity that had built the pyramids fractured. The first intermediate period had begun. Older histories often described it simply as chaos. The evidence is more complicated. Life continued. Local centers could prosper. Culture did not vanish. But the political system of the Pyramid Age was gone. And if Egypt depended entirely on one powerful pharaoh ruling from the center, the story should end here. It didn't. Competing rulers did not abandon the idea of Egypt. They fought to possess it, to reunify the two lands, restore order, and become the legitimate king of a civilization that still existed even when its government did not. Eventually, one of them succeeded. Egypt was about to return, but not unchanged. A civilization built to endure had learned that even stone could not guarantee eternity. The real test was whether the system could rebuild itself after breaking. Egypt had collapsed, but Egypt had not disappeared. That distinction may be one of the most important in its entire history. For generations, rival centers competed for control of the Nile Valley. In the north, rulers based around Heracleopolis claimed authority. In the south, another center of power was rising at Thebes. Eventually, the struggle produced a winner. Around 2055 BC, Mentuhotep II of Thebes reunified Egypt and brought the first intermediate period to an end. The kingdom had returned. But this was not simply the old kingdom rebuilt exactly as it had been. Egypt had experienced fragmentation. Regional elites had learned how much power they could accumulate when the center weakened. The monarchy that emerged from reunification had to govern with that memory. The Middle Kingdom became, in many ways, a more mature version of the Egyptian state. Royal authority strengthened, administration expanded, agricultural projects developed the Fayum. Trade reached beyond Egypt's borders. Expeditions sought stone, metals, timber, incense, and other valuable resources. To the south, Egyptian influence expanded deeper into Nubia. Fortresses along the Nile controlled movement, trade, and access to wealth flowing north. Egypt was not simply rebuilding, it was learning. Ideas once closely associated with royal eternity also became increasingly accessible beyond the king. Funerary beliefs evolved. Texts, coffins, tombs, and rituals show hopes for existence after death, extending far beyond the pharaoh. Egyptian culture had survived collapse, but it had not remained frozen, it adapted. That word matters. Egypt's longevity did not come from resisting every change. It came in part from absorbing change without losing the basic idea of what Egypt was. For centuries, the Middle Kingdom flourished. Then the center weakened again. Political authority fragmented. Dynastic succession became unstable. Meanwhile, people from Western Asia had been entering and settling in the Eastern Nile Delta for generations. This was not necessarily an invasion at first. The ancient world moved constantly. Traders crossed borders, workers migrated, soldiers served foreign rulers, families settled. Then the balance of power changed. During the Second Intermediate Period, rulers of Western Asian origin controlled significant parts of northern Egypt. Later Egyptians called them the Hyksos. Egyptian memory would portray their rule as foreign occupation. The reality was more complicated. The Hyksos did not control all Egypt. They ruled primarily from Avaris in the eastern delta. In the south, Egyptian rulers continued from Thebes. Once again, Egypt was divided. But this time, a foreign dynasty sat on an Egyptian throne. And then something revealing happened. The Hyksos adopted elements of Egyptian kingship. They used Egyptian titles and participated in Egyptian political and religious traditions. The conquerors entered Egypt, and Egypt began absorbing the conquerors. Foreign rulers could control Egyptian territory. But ruling Egypt often meant entering a system far older than themselves. The throne came with expectations. The civilization had cultural gravity. In Thebes, however, southern rulers had no intention of accepting permanent division. Tension became war. One ruler, Sekenenre Tau, appears to have died violently. His mummy preserves severe head wounds, a brutal reminder that this was not merely propaganda carved onto stone. Kamose pushed north. Then came Ahmose I. Under Ahmose, Theban forces captured Avaris and expelled the Hyksos from their center of power. Egypt was reunited again. For the second time in our story, the civilization had passed through fragmentation and returned. But this restoration produced something new. Egypt had learned a dangerous lesson. For centuries, deserts and borders had helped create security. Now foreign rulers had governed from inside Egypt itself. Waiting behind the border no longer felt like protection. If Egypt wanted security, it would push those borders outward. The reunification under Ahmose marks the beginning of the new kingdom. The Egypt of Hatshepsut, Thutmose III, Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and Ramses II. The civilization that had once built pyramids to demonstrate permanence was about to build something else, an empire. Before we follow it there, consider what has already happened. The Old Kingdom collapsed, Egypt returned, the Middle Kingdom weakened, foreign rulers controlled the north, Egypt returned again. We began with a question. How does a civilization survive for 3,000 years? Now we have part of the answer. Not by avoiding collapse, by surviving it. If you're still here, subscribe to the channel, because the Egypt most people recognize is still ahead of us, and it is about to become more powerful than ever before. The Hyksos were gone. Egypt was unified, but the memory of foreign rule remained. The pharaohs who followed would carry Egyptian armies outward, south into Nubia and north into the Levant. With conquest came wealth. Gold flowed north. Tribute entered the royal court. Temples expanded. Priests gained influence. Pharaohs commissioned monuments designed to make victories permanent. Egypt was approaching the height of its power. But an empire creates problems a kingdom does not have. Borders must be defended, armies maintained, territories controlled, wealth protected. Egypt had learned how to survive collapse. Now it faced a different test. Could it survive success? Egypt had survived foreign rule. Now it intended to make sure it never happened again. The early pharaohs of the New Kingdom pushed Egyptian power beyond the traditional Nile Valley. Armies moved south into Nubia and north into the Levant. Fortresses, garrisons, tribute systems, and diplomacy extended the crown's reach. This was no longer simply a kingdom protecting itself. Egypt was becoming an empire. Conquest brought wealth. Nubian gold helped finance royal ambitions on a scale that reshaped Egypt's temples, cities, and political power. From farther north came timber, metals, luxury goods, and tribute. Much of that wealth flowed toward two institutions that were increasingly difficult to separate: the pharaoh and the gods. Nowhere was this more visible than Thebes. The city that had led the struggle against the Hyksos became a great center of the new kingdom. Its god, Amun, rose with it. At Karnak, generations of pharaohs expanded one of the largest religious complexes ever constructed: a gateway, a courtyard, an obelisk, a sanctuary, a record of victory. Stone became memory, and memory became political power. Then came a ruler who did not fit the image most people associate with a conquering pharaoh. Hatshepsut, daughter of a king, wife of a king, initially regent for the young Thutmose III, and eventually pharaoh in her own right. Official images could show her with traditional symbols of male kingship, including the ceremonial false beard. This was not simply disguise. The office of pharaoh was larger than the individual occupying it. To rule Egypt was to enter an ancient role with established symbols, rituals, and expectations. Hatshepsut adapted herself to that role, then used it remarkably well. Her reign emphasized building, stability, and trade. A famous expedition to Punt returned with incense and valuable goods. At Deir el-Bahari, her mortuary temple rose in terraces against the cliffs, architecture seeming to emerge from the landscape itself. But permanence in Egypt was always complicated. After Hatshepsut's death, some of her names and images were deliberately removed or altered. Once explained simply as personal revenge by Thutmose III, the motives may have involved more complex questions of succession and legitimacy. Whatever the reason, the attempt reveals something almost ironic. In Egypt, controlling the future sometimes meant controlling the past. Thutmose III would take Egyptian power farther than almost any pharaoh before him. His armies campaigned repeatedly in the Levant. At Megiddo, Egyptian accounts describe a risky direct approach through the hills and a victory over a coalition of local rulers. Royal inscriptions were designed to celebrate kings, not provide neutral military journalism. But the outcome is clear. Egypt became one of the dominant powers of the Eastern Mediterranean world. This was a different Egypt from the civilization that built the Great Pyramid. The pyramids had expressed power inward. The new kingdom projected power outward. Foreign rulers sent tribute and gifts. Diplomatic networks connected Egypt with other great powers. And we can hear echoes of that world in the Amarna letters. Hundreds of clay tablets, many written in Akkadian, the diplomatic language between major courts. Kings wrote to kings. They discussed marriages, gold, gifts, alliances, complaints, and status. Sometimes the letters feel surprisingly familiar. One ruler wonders why another has not sent enough gold. Another complains about disappointing gifts. Behind the divine titles were human beings negotiating prestige. But maintaining an empire was expensive. Armies needed supplies. Garrisons needed support. Vassals had to remain loyal. Rival powers had to be watched. At home, the priesthood of Amun benefited enormously from royal donations and military success. Land, wealth, and influence accumulated around the temples. For a time, the system worked extraordinarily well. Then came Amenhotep III. His reign marked one of the great high points of Egyptian wealth and international prestige. Egypt seemed secure, rich, confident, perhaps even untouchable. And that is precisely where the story becomes dangerous. Civilizations rarely recognize their most fragile assumptions, while those assumptions are still working. For centuries, certain ideas had remained remarkably stable. The Nile, the king, the gods, Ma'at. The belief that proper order connected the human world with something larger. Then Amenhotep III died. His son inherited one of the most powerful kingdoms on earth. At first, he was Amenhotep IV. That name would not survive. Neither would the religious world he inherited. The new pharaoh began elevating the Aten, the solar disk, above the traditional gods. Then he changed his name, Akhenaten. He abandoned Thebes and built a new capital on previously undeveloped land, Akhenaten, today called Amarna. Temples changed, royal art changed. The religious establishment was challenged. The name of Amun itself was attacked on monuments. For more than 1,000 years, Egypt had survived civil war, fragmentation, and foreign rule. Now the challenge was coming from the throne itself. The pharaoh was not fighting an enemy. He was attempting to rewrite what Egypt meant. Akhenaten did not inherit a broken country. That is what makes his story so remarkable. He inherited Egypt near the height of its wealth and prestige. The Aten was not new. The solar disk had appeared in Egyptian religion before Akhenaten. What changed was the position he gave it. During his reign, the Aten became increasingly dominant. Other gods were pushed aside. Traditional institutions lost royal support. Even the name of Amun was attacked. Amenhotep IV had contained the name of Amun. Akhenaten did not. The king had publicly broken with one of Egypt's most powerful religious traditions. Then he left Thebes. On an empty stretch of desert, he ordered an entirely new capital. Akhenaten, the horizon of the Aten, today Amarna. This was more than a new palace. It was an attempt to create a new center for the Egyptian world. Boundary stones marked the city. Temples, palaces, houses, workshops, and administrative buildings rose where almost nothing had stood before. The architecture reflected the theology. Traditional temples often led inward toward dark, sacred interiors. Aten temples emphasized open courtyards. Sunlight mattered. The god was the visible disk of the sun. Its rays represented ending in small hands, offering life to the royal family. Even royal art looked different. Akhenaten could appear with an elongated face, narrow chest, prominent abdomen, and unusual proportions. He and Nefertiti were shown with their daughters in scenes of striking intimacy beneath the Aten's rays. But these were still political images. Access to the divine was increasingly focused through the king and his family. Akhenaten is sometimes described as history's first monotheist. It is an attractive label. It is also more complicated than that. The evidence shows an extraordinary elevation of the Aten and suppression of important traditional cults. But modern categories can make ancient religion look simpler than it was. Whatever label we use, the practical consequences were dramatic. The pharaoh who was supposed to preserve Ma'at, established order, was deliberately rewriting part of that order. The office designed to protect continuity had become the instrument of disruption. Meanwhile, Egypt still had an empire to maintain. The Amarna letters reveal rulers and Egyptian vassals writing about diplomacy, conflict, and requests for assistance. Some complained of threats, others accused neighbors of betrayal. Historians still debate how much Akhenaten's religious priorities affected foreign policy. We should resist turning every problem in the Levant into evidence that he simply abandoned the empire. But one thing is clear: the world outside Amarna had not stopped moving while Akhenaten transformed religion at home. Then, after roughly 17 years on the throne, Akhenaten died. And his revolution faced the problem of every revolution built around one person. What happens when that person is gone? The years immediately after his death remain among the most complicated in Egyptian royal history. The sequence of rulers is debated, identities are uncertain, Nefertiti's final role remains disputed. A ruler named Smenkhare briefly appears. Then the throne passed to a boy, Tutankhamun. Even his name revealed the world he inherited, but he would become famous under another name, Tutankhamun. Amun had returned. The royal court abandoned Akhenaten's capital. Traditional temples were restored. The old gods returned to official prominence. The revolution began to be dismantled. A surviving inscription, commonly called the Restoration Stela, presents a country whose temples had fallen into neglect and whose gods had turned away. Royal inscriptions justified the ruler who commissioned them, and Tutankhamun's regime had every reason to portray the previous era as disorder. But that is precisely why the language matters. Egypt understood recovery through an ancient idea. Order had been disturbed. Ma'at had to return. Tutankhamun died while still very young, probably in his late teens. At the time, there was little reason to believe he would become one of the most famous pharaohs in history. His reign was short. His political achievements were limited beside Egypt's greatest rulers. His tomb was relatively modest by royal standards. Then more than 3,000 years passed. In 1922, Howard Carter's team discovered the tomb in the Valley of the Kings. Inside remained an extraordinary collection of burial objects, and the golden funerary mask that would become one of the most recognizable faces of ancient Egypt. The irony is difficult to miss. Akhenaten tried to transform Egyptian religion on a scale few rulers ever dared. Much of his legacy was deliberately dismantled. Tutankhamun helped restore the old system, died young, and thousands of years later became a global symbol of Egypt. After Tutankhamun came then Horemheb, a military figure who pushed restoration further. Horemheb reorganized administration, acted against abuses, and worked to erase the Amarna episode from official memory. Akhenaten and rulers connected with him were omitted from later king lists. Egypt was not merely reversing the revolution. It was repairing the historical record around it. This may sound like a civilization resisting change. The deeper pattern is more interesting. Egypt changed constantly. Its borders changed, military technology changed, art changed, religious practice evolved. What it resisted was the destruction of continuity itself. Akhenaten had tried to redirect the system too quickly and too completely around one royal vision. The system outlived him. Once again, Egypt absorbed a crisis. Once again, it reconstructed the language of order. Horemheb died without an heir. The throne passed into a new royal house. Eventually, that dynasty produced a pharaoh whose name would be carved across Egypt with almost unmatched ambition, Ramses II. He would rule for more than 6 decades, build on an enormous scale, and fight one of the most famous battles of the ancient world. But Ramses inherited something Akhenaten could never control. A world beyond Egypt's borders that was becoming increasingly unstable. The next threat would not come from one rebellious pharaoh. It would arrive as part of a crisis spreading across an entire international system. Egypt had survived the man who tried to rewrite it. Now it would have to survive a world beginning to collapse around it. By the time Ramses II came to the throne, Egypt had survived almost everything an ancient state could face: political collapse, civil war, foreign rule, religious revolution. Each time the system bent, then rebuilt itself. Ramses would rule as if that cycle could continue forever. He became pharaoh around 1279 BC, inheriting a kingdom again competing for influence beyond the Nile Valley. But Egypt was no longer alone at the top. To the north, the Hittite Empire had expanded into territories Egypt considered essential. Between them lay the cities and kingdoms of the Levant and Syria. One city became a symbol of the struggle, Kadesh. Early in his reign, Ramses marched north. According to Egyptian accounts, he approached Kadesh believing the main Hittite army was farther away than it actually was. It wasn't. The Hittites were nearby and waiting. As Egyptian forces became separated, Hittite chariots attacked. The inscriptions transform what followed into something almost mythic. Ramses stands nearly alone. His soldiers panic. Enemies surround him. The pharaoh calls upon Amun and fights back with superhuman courage. Magnificent propaganda, and exactly why we must read it carefully. Ramses was not writing history for us. He was creating memory for Egypt. The battle appears to have ended without the decisive Egyptian victory later monuments suggest. Kadesh remained beyond permanent Egyptian control. The Hittites survived. Years later, Egypt and the Hittite Empire reached one of the earliest surviving international peace agreements known to history. Neither side could eliminate the other, so they negotiated. But if the battlefield did not give Ramses absolute triumph, stone could. Again and again, Kadesh appeared on Egyptian monuments. The pharaoh charging his enemies, the king larger than everyone around him, chaos before him, order behind him. Most Egyptians would never travel to Kadesh. They could see the temple wall, and on that wall, Ramses had won. Power is not only about what happens, it is also about who gets to build the version that survives. And Ramses built everywhere. At Abu Simbel, colossal statues confronted the landscape. At Thebes, the Ramesseum celebrated his reign. At Karnak and Luxor, his name joined monumental landscapes shaped by generations of kings. His cartouches appeared across Egypt, sometimes on his own monuments, sometimes added to structures already ancient. If you place your name everywhere, memory begins to look like permanence. And Ramses had time. His reign lasted more than 60 years. For many Egyptians, he may have been the only pharaoh they had ever known. A reign that long can make political order feel like part of nature. But no king is permanent. Ramses eventually died in his 90s. And beyond Egypt's borders, pressures were increasing. Around the end of the 13th and beginning of the 12th centuries BC, much of the interconnected Bronze Age world entered extraordinary disruption. Cities were destroyed, palatial systems collapsed, trade networks broke. The Hittite Empire vanished as a major power. The Mycenaean palace world collapsed. For years, people have searched for one explanation: invasion, drought, famine, earthquakes, rebellion, changes in warfare, migration, trade breakdown. No single explanation neatly accounts for everything. The more unsettling possibility is that several pressures interacted. The Bronze Age world had become deeply connected. Connection created wealth. It also created dependence. A kingdom might survive one bad harvest, one rebellion, one lost trade route, one invasion. But what happens when several arrive together? Egypt was about to find out. Egyptian inscriptions describe groups modern historians collectively call the Sea Peoples. The name can mislead. These were not necessarily one nation or one unified army. Egyptian sources name different groups, and scholars still debate their origins and role. What we do know is that Egypt faced serious military threats. Merneptah fought enemies approaching from the west. A generation later, under Ramses III, the danger became more dramatic. Images at Medinet Habu show battles on land and water. Ships collide. Archers fire. Enemies fall into the water. Families and carts appear among moving groups. The inscriptions present Ramses III as the defender who stopped invasion. Once again, Egypt survived. The Hittite Empire disappeared. Major centers collapsed. Long-distance systems broke apart, and Egypt remained standing. If our story ended here, the answer to our opening question might seem obvious. Egypt survived because it was simply stronger. That would be wrong. Survival had come at a cost. Egypt's influence abroad diminished. Its economy faced pressure. the state struggled with resources. During the reign of Ramses III, workers at Deir el-Medina experienced delays in receiving grain rations. These were skilled workers responsible for royal tombs. Eventually, they stopped working and protested. More than 3,000 years ago, people serving the pharaoh walked off the job because they had not been paid on time. Often called the first recorded labor strike in history, the episode reveals something the triumphal walls do not. The state that once organized the Great Pyramid was struggling to deliver grain to the people building royal tombs. Tomb robbery became increasingly serious. Corruption appears in surviving records. Royal authority weakened. Powerful temple institutions controlled significant wealth. The center was losing its grip. Again. But this time, recovery would be different. The Old Kingdom fell. Egypt rebuilt. The Middle Kingdom weakened. Egypt rebuilt. The Hyksos ruled the north. Egypt expelled them and created an empire. Akhenaten disrupted the old order. Egypt reversed his revolution. After the New Kingdom, Egypt would survive, but increasingly under rulers who came from somewhere else. Libyans, Nubians, Assyrians, Persians, Macedonians, eventually Romans. The civilization had not ended. Temples still functioned. Priests still performed rituals. Pharaohs still appeared on walls in forms recognizable to kings who had lived 1,000 years earlier. But the balance had changed. For most of its great age, Egypt looked outward and asked how much of the surrounding world it could control. Now the question increasingly became, how much of Egypt would the surrounding world control? The age of Ramses had looked like permanence. Instead, it was the last great display of a system approaching the end of its imperial power. The pyramids still stood, the Nile still flowed, Egypt was still Egypt. But the long fall had begun. The long fall of ancient Egypt did not look like a fall, not at first. There was no single day when the temples closed, the pharaoh disappeared, and everyone understood that an age had ended. Instead, power fragmented, slowly, then repeatedly. After the New Kingdom, Egypt entered the Third Intermediate Period. The name can make these centuries sound like an empty space between more important eras. They were not. Egypt's temples still mattered. Its cities were alive. Its religious traditions remained powerful. But political authority was divided. In the north, kings ruled from the delta. In the south, the priesthood of Amun at Thebes exercised enormous influence. Over time, military families of Libyan origin became increasingly important. Eventually, rulers with Libyan ancestry took the throne. At first glance, this sounds like another stage in Egypt's disappearance. Foreigners had gained power. But something familiar happened. They became pharaohs. They adopted Egyptian titles, participated in Egyptian religion, and commissioned monuments in Egyptian forms. The rulers changed. The institution absorbed them. To rule Egypt successfully, outsiders often had to become Egyptian in public. Then the pattern repeated from the south. In Nubia, a powerful kingdom had developed in Kush. Egypt had once dominated this territory. Now the direction of power reversed. Kushite kings moved north and eventually controlled Egypt. And what did these conquerors do? They presented themselves as pharaohs. The 25th dynasty embraced Egyptian religious traditions, supported temples, honored Amun, and used Egyptian royal imagery. Centuries earlier, Egyptian armies had marched south into Nubia. Now Nubian rulers marched north, claiming to restore Egypt. Again, conquest did not simply erase Egyptian civilization. The conquerors entered it. But to the northeast, a new imperial power was expanding. Assyria. The Neo-Assyrian Empire pushed into the Levant and eventually confronted Egypt's Kushite rulers. Assyrian armies invaded. Memphis was captured. Thebes itself was eventually sacked in the 7th century BC. Thebes, city of Amun, sacred center of the New Kingdom, home of rulers who once sent armies deep into Asia, had been reached by an army from Mesopotamia. Egypt's geography was no longer enough, and yet Egypt returned again. As Assyrian power weakened, a dynasty based at Sai reunified much of the country. The 26th dynasty began what is sometimes called the Sate Renaissance. The word Renaissance matters. Egyptian rulers looked backward. Artists revived styles associated with much earlier periods. Ancient forms gained new prestige. Egypt responded to uncertainty by reaching deeper into its own past. By then, the pyramids of Giza were already more than 2,000 years old. Egypt was not simply old, it knew it was old. Its past had become a source of authority, but cultural memory could not stop armies. In 525 BC, the Persian king Cambyses II invaded. Egypt became part of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, again a foreign ruler. Again, pharaonic traditions continued. Persian kings could be represented as Egyptian pharaohs. Temples continued operating. Administrative life continued. Egypt had been conquered without ceasing to be Egypt. Persian rule was contested. Rebellions occurred. Egyptians regained independence for periods. Persian forces returned. The old cycle had changed. Earlier history often moved between centralized native kingdoms and fragmentation. Now Egypt was caught between much larger imperial systems. Its wealth made it valuable. Its geography made it strategic. Its grain made it indispensable. Everyone wanted Egypt. Then, in 332 BC, another conqueror arrived. Young, fast, already destroying Persian power, Alexander of Macedon, Alexander the Great. When Alexander entered Egypt, Persian authority there collapsed with relatively little resistance. He was recognized as ruler, visited Memphis, and journeyed to the Oracle of Amun at Siwa, an episode later surrounded by legend and political meaning. On the Mediterranean coast, he ordered the foundation of a city, Alexandria. Few decisions would shape Egypt's future more profoundly. Alexander did not stay long. He continued east, shattered the Persian Empire, and marched as far as India. Then, in 323 BC, he died in Babylon at only 32. His empire fractured among his generals. One of them, Ptolemy, took Egypt. A new dynasty was born, Macedonian in origin, Greek-speaking, but ruling as pharaohs. The Ptolemies understood what foreign rulers before them had discovered. Egypt could be conquered militarily. Governing it meant negotiating with a civilization much older than the conqueror. Ptolemaic kings supported Egyptian temples, appeared in traditional pharaonic imagery, and had their names written in hieroglyphic cartouches. At the same time, Ptolemaic Egypt was something new. Greek and Egyptian worlds existed beside one another, interacted, and sometimes remained sharply distinct. Alexandria became one of the great cities of the Mediterranean. Its harbor connected Egypt to a wider commercial world. Its lighthouse became one of the seven wonders. Its intellectual institutions attracted scholars, writers, mathematicians, and scientists. Egypt was changing again. Not disappearing, changing. The Ptolemaic dynasty lasted nearly 3 centuries, but royal family conflicts became brutal. Court politics produced exile, assassination, and civil war. Meanwhile, another power expanded. Rome. It defeated Carthage, expanded east, and increasingly dominated Mediterranean politics. Ptolemaic rulers came to depend on Roman support in their own struggles. Rome could influence who remained on the throne. Egypt still had pharaohs, but another state was beginning to decide who those pharaohs could be. Then in 69 BC, a girl was born into the Ptolemaic royal family, Cleopatra VII. She was not the first Cleopatra. She belonged to a Macedonian dynasty that had ruled since Alexander's age. But history would remember her as the last great pharaoh of Egypt. When Cleopatra came to the throne, the Great Pyramid was already more than 2,500 years old. Cleopatra lived closer in time to us than she did to the builders of the Great Pyramid. The Egypt she ruled was already ancient to itself. Khufu was distant history. The old, middle, and new kingdoms had risen and fallen. Hyksos, Libyans, Kushites, Assyrians, Persians, and Macedonians had all ruled or invaded the land. And still there was an Egypt. Temples functioned. Priests performed rituals whose roots reached deep into the past. Hieroglyphs covered sacred walls. The Nile organized life. Pharaoh still meant something. Our opening question has followed us for nearly 3,000 years. How did Egypt survive? Now the answer is clearer. It survived because Egyptian civilization was never as rigid as its stone monuments make it appear. It could absorb outsiders, reinterpret kingship, rebuild institutions, lose political independence without immediately losing cultural identity. It could change while convincing itself it was restoring something ancient. But every strategy has a limit. By Cleopatra's time, Egypt faced something different. Not another temporary invader. Not another dynasty that needed to become Egyptian in order to rule. Rome was building a system large enough to absorb Egypt completely. Cleopatra understood the danger. For nearly 2 decades, she would try to prevent it. She would ally herself with 2 of the most powerful men Rome ever produced. One would be assassinated, the other would gamble everything on a final war. And when that war ended, there would be no Egyptian restoration waiting on the other side. After more than 3,000 years, the age of the pharaohs was approaching its final act. Cleopatra inherited a throne, but what she really inherited was a countdown. By the time she became queen in 51 BC, Egypt was still enormously valuable. The Nile produced grain on a scale few Mediterranean regions could match. Alexandria was one of the great cities of the ancient world. The kingdom possessed wealth, trade routes, temples, ports, and centuries of prestige. But independence had become fragile. Rome was no longer merely a distant power. Rome was the power. Cleopatra initially ruled alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. The arrangement quickly collapsed. A struggle for power forced Cleopatra away from Alexandria. At the same time, Rome was fighting a civil war between Pompey and Julius Caesar. Pompey lost. He fled to Egypt, expecting refuge. Instead, he was murdered shortly after reaching the coast. His killers apparently thought they were offering Caesar a gift. They had miscalculated. When Caesar arrived in Alexandria, he entered a kingdom already divided. Cleopatra saw an opportunity. The famous stories surrounding their first meeting have become legendary. What matters is what followed. Cleopatra secured Caesar's support. The Egyptian dynastic struggle became entangled with Roman military power. Fighting erupted in Alexandria. Ptolemy XIII died. Cleopatra emerged as queen. Her relationship with Caesar was political, personal, and enormously consequential. She had a son whom she presented as Caesar's child and traveled to Rome. For a moment, she had found a way not to escape Roman power, but to stand beside it. Then, in 44 BC, Julius Caesar entered a meeting of the Roman Senate. He never walked out. His assassination changed Cleopatra's political world instantly. She returned to Egypt. Rome descended into another struggle for power. Eventually, Mark Antony took responsibility for Rome's eastern territories. That brought him directly into Cleopatra's world. Their relationship became one of history's most famous romances. But if we see only romance, we miss the stakes. Antony needed resources. Cleopatra needed protection. Egypt had money, ships, and grain. Antony had Roman military power. Together, they could support each other's ambitions. They also had children. Their partnership became increasingly public and increasingly threatening to Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir. Rome moved toward another civil war. Octavian understood the power of framing. Instead of presenting the conflict simply as Roman against Roman, his propaganda increasingly focused on Cleopatra, a foreign queen, an Eastern monarch, a supposed threat to Roman values. Antony could be portrayed as a Roman lost under her influence. The political message was devastatingly effective. In 31 BC, the two sides met near the western coast of Greece, Actium. On one side, Octavian, with Agrippa playing a central military role. On the other, Antony and Cleopatra. The exact reasons events unfolded as they did remain debated, but the result was decisive. Cleopatra's ships broke away. Antony followed. Much of their remaining force collapsed or surrendered. They returned to Egypt. The war was not technically over, but the future had changed. Octavian came after them. By 30 BC, his forces reached Alexandria. Antony's position disintegrated. According to ancient accounts, believing Cleopatra dead, he attempted suicide and later died. Cleopatra was now alone. For years, she had navigated dynastic conflict, Caesar, Antony, and Roman civil war. But Octavian presented a different problem. He did not need Cleopatra. A defeated queen could be taken to Rome, displayed in a triumph, reduced from pharaoh to prisoner. Cleopatra died in August of 30 BC. The exact method remains uncertain. The famous story says an ASP delivered the fatal bite. Ancient sources preserve different possibilities, and modern historians still debate the details. The snake became immortal. The certainty did not. Cleopatra was dead. Antony was dead. Octavian controlled Egypt. Cleopatra's son Caesarion was killed soon afterward. The Ptolemaic dynasty was finished. For the first time since the Age of Narmer, more than 3,000 years earlier, Egypt would no longer have a pharaoh ruling an independent Egyptian state. If we wanted a clean ending, we could stop here. 30 BC, Rome conquers Egypt. Ancient Egypt ends. But history rarely gives us endings that clean. Because ancient Egypt did not disappear when Cleopatra died. The Nile continued to flow. Farmers worked the land. Temples remained active. Priests performed rituals. Traditional gods continued to be worshipped. Hieroglyphs continued to be carved. Roman emperors could even appear on Egyptian temple walls dressed as pharaohs. Think about that. Rome conquered Egypt. And inside Egyptian temples, Rome dressed itself as Egypt. The cultural gravity was still there, at least for a while. But something fundamental had changed. Egypt was no longer the center of its own political world. It had become a province inside a much larger imperial system. Its grain helped feed Rome. Its wealth moved through Roman networks. Decisions about Egypt increasingly belonged to rulers far beyond the Nile. Over the centuries that followed, the religious world changed too. Christianity spread through Egypt. Traditional temple cults gradually declined. Imperial policies altered the conditions under which older religions operated. Priestly communities diminished. Then something almost unimaginable happened. The writing system that had covered Egyptian monuments for thousands of years stopped being understood. The last known dated hieroglyphic inscription was carved at Philae in AD 394. For thousands of years, scribes had preserved names, prayers, victories, offerings, and stories in hieroglyphs. Then the chain broke. Generations passed, the temples remained, the inscriptions remained, the pyramids remained. But people could no longer read what the ancient Egyptians had written. Egypt had achieved the impossible. Its monuments survived its memory. And now we can finally answer the question we began with. The greatest mystery of ancient Egypt was never simply how the pyramids were built. It was how this civilization survived for more than 3,000 years. The answer was not that Egypt never collapsed. It collapsed repeatedly. The Old Kingdom fractured. The Middle Kingdom weakened. Foreign rulers controlled the north. The empire lost its territories. Religious revolutions shook the state. Libyans ruled, Nubians ruled, Assyrians invaded, Persians conquered, Macedonians took the throne, Romans arrived. Again and again, something that looked like the end wasn't. Egypt survived because it could absorb disruption. Its geography gave it stability. The Nile gave it agricultural wealth and connection. Its institutions created continuity. Its religion gave political order a sacred language. Its idea of kingship could survive individual kings. And perhaps most importantly, Egyptian civilization could change while presenting that change as continuity. A foreign ruler could become pharaoh. A broken kingdom could be reunited. An abandoned god could return. An ancient artistic style could be revived centuries later. Egypt did not survive by remaining frozen. It survived by changing slowly enough that each generation could still recognize the world it inherited. Until eventually, it couldn't. There was no final army that destroyed ancient Egypt in one afternoon. No single pharaoh whose mistake ended 3,000 years. No moment when everyone went to sleep in ancient Egypt and woke up in a different world. The end was slower. The kings disappeared. The political system changed. The temples gradually fell silent. The old gods lost their worshippers. The language evolved. The writing became unreadable. And eventually, the civilization that had spent so much of its history preparing for eternity became something else, a memory. But even that memory refused to disappear. The Great Pyramid still stands. Tutankhamun still looks back at us through gold. Ramses still sits above the desert at Abu Simbel. Akhenaten's abandoned revolution can still be reconstructed from broken images and ruined walls. And Cleopatra, born thousands of years after the first pharaohs, still feels strangely close. Maybe that is ancient Egypt's final contradiction. The civilization ended, but it achieved something remarkably close to what its monuments had promised all along. It survived death, not as a kingdom, not as an empire, but as an idea powerful enough that, thousands of years later, we are still trying to understand it. And there is one final twist. The power that absorbed Egypt in 30 BC believed its own empire might last forever. Rome controlled the Mediterranean. Its armies seemed unstoppable. Its monuments projected permanence. Its rulers would soon be treated almost like gods. Rome had taken Egypt, but Rome had inherited the same illusion. That power could defeat time. And we already know how that story ends. If you made it this far, you already know this isn't the kind of channel that's going anywhere. We put out something like this every single day. The version of the story that survives contact with the actual evidence. Subscribing keeps you in that loop. And if this one stayed with you, send it to 5 people who'd sit through something this long with you. Not everyone will. Some people do. Leave a comment, a real one. Tell me what part of this actually surprised you. And tell me what civilization, what forgotten site, what quiet piece of hidden history you want us to look at next. We'll be here tomorrow, still digging.